lot of teachers are afraid to do what you're doing today and come out and actually say, this is what's going on and it's your perspective.
What he really means is that teachers know better than to legitimize misinformation.
There's nothing professional development about telling you that you're wrong for your views on somebody's mental illness.
To be a working teacher for a public board of education, one of the largest in Western Canada, proudly spouting transphobia. That is completely wild to me, and it gets worse.
And that's only one part of how indoctrination is taking over the school system.
This is a very loosely crocheted blanket of an argument. Like, you could stick your whole fist through, there's so many holes. This video contains subject matter which may be inappropriate for some viewers. We are standing at a crossroads in Alberta, and the meaning of teaching democracy and human rights is being challenged in real time. A province-wide strike by Alberta teachers is currently underway, not just over wages or class sizes, but over what it means to learn and to lead. With the shadow of the notwithstanding clause looming, the government is signaling that rights are optional, dissent is inconvenient, and fear-mongering is curriculum. In today's video, we're dissecting an interview posted by the Berta Proud Dad figure online, in which he interviews a teacher who identifies as conservative.
My God, there's room for everybody, let's just say that.
And openly spouts transphobic rhetoric while couching it as just an opinion. Armed with anecdotes and opinions like, schools are actively indoctrinating students, teachers are pushing political ideologies, transgenderism is a mental illness, and PD days are for brainwashing. Yeah. All that. We're talking loaded language, false equivalencies, emotional manipulation, and yes, a whole lot of cherry-picked storytelling dressed up as concern for children. And by the end of this, you're going to see exactly how misinformation, bias, and a sprinkle of moral grandstanding can masquerade as teaching wisdom. Honeys, we are going line by line, breaking down every fallacy, every manipulation tactic, pulling apart the hyperbole, and exposing the anti-intellectual undercurrents, because these are warning signs for the future of our province's public system and for the rights of every student within it. Hello, you stunning woman on the go. Welcome back to my channel. My name is David Day, and you are watching Dismantling Hate, the series where I find some hateful online content and we react to it with sharp analysis, unapologetic resistance, and just enough comedy to keep us from losing our minds. Let's get into Berta Proud Dad. Proud Berta Dad? Let's get into it. D-Talk? Nope. Let's get into it. Dismantling Hate starts now.
Let's get this roast a cooking.
Berta Proud Dad brands himself as an independent media figure and podcast host with a politically charged edge. His Berta Proud Dad show is described as a platform where mental health and politics intersect. On his website and podcast pages, he presents himself as a recovering addict who now comments on cultural issues, free speech, education, and politics. His content tends to lean into populist style tropes, concerns about gender ideology in schools, woke culture, protecting kids. You get the vibe, you know where this is going. And because he positions himself as a voice for the everyday parent, he plays a role in shaping the narrative around education, identity, and rights. And in this case, his interview with a self-identified conservative teacher becomes an instance of how ideas of gender, education, and human rights are being circulated and legitimized online. Given that the backdrop of this conversation is happening amongst a teacher strike, there's pressure from the government, including talk of invoking the notwithstanding clause that we're going to talk about later, and debates over what counts as good education and what rights are worth protecting. His platform serves both as a mirror and a megaphone to the trends I'm critiquing: anti-intellectualism, fear-mongering, and ideological mobilization in the name of protecting children. So he posted this interview with this teacher first on Facebook and then on YouTube. And while I'm not able to double check if it's still on Facebook because I'm banned, I wear that as a badge, he actually took this video off of YouTube. So it's no longer there for your viewing pleasure, but thanks to me, a certified amateur sleuth, I actually screen recorded it 3 different times because I just had a sense that it would be taken off. So we're going to sit through this entire 30-minute video, and not to scare you or overwhelm you, but I have a 30-page script sitting in front of me, so I have a lot of very specific things to say, along with my reactions in the moment. This is not just a poorly made podcast. It is so bad. It is probably the most anti-intellectual thing I've ever watched, and that's saying something. I have over 100 episodes of Dismantling Hate, and I just want you to know that I have cropped this video for your viewing pleasure so you can see it right here. But I just want to take a moment to show you what the original posted video looked like. Maybe we could have shot it in landscape. I guess if your only point is to monetize conservative clickbait on social media, you don't really care about the quality of a YouTube interview. But that's just my opinion. Let's go.
All right, folks, this is what we've been waiting for. We have Carrie with me. Carrie is a brave teacher here in Calgary, Alberta, working for the Calgary Public Schools. Last night I put out a video saying that we needed teachers to speak up, and Carrie was brave enough to come onto the show with me today. And Carrie, I'd just like to welcome you and thank you for allowing us into your home to have this interview.
Okay, let's pause right here. The framing of bravery. The idea that it's brave for a teacher to go on a populist right-wing platform and echo government talking points is not bravery. It's branding. In this context, bravery means defying unions or speaking against your colleagues. This is not courage. It's compliance disguised as heroism. This kind of introduction is designed to legitimize the guest before a single fact is shared. It primes the audience emotionally. This person is brave. Therefore, this person must be telling the truth. That's a propaganda technique called preemptive valorization. It replaces evidence with emotional credibility. And you might be familiar with this if you've ever sat through a multi-level marketing pitch.
So how did you get involved with teaching?
So I became a teacher late. I actually didn't get my teaching degree till I turned 45. I always really liked teaching. I discovered a love of teaching when I was running a cooking school. I was a chef for 25 years, although I took 10 years off to raise my kids.
Okay, so here we get the relatable biography segment, which on its own is harmless, but rhetorically it serves to build the emotional trust before introducing ideological claims. It's a classic soft start in populist interviews. First you establish the personal story, then you pivot to a grievance that you have. By presenting herself as a tradesperson and not an academic, she subtly appeals to the anti-intellectual sentiment, positioning herself as the common sense teacher in contrast to elitist educators. It's the populist framework of real world versus ivory tower.
So I worked in the restaurant industry for years, so I consider myself a tradesperson. But I saw my son, my oldest son specifically, just really have some terrible teachers. And I say that cautiously because I don't like calling people terrible teachers. I think they'll work really hard, but they were terrible. And they really damaged his idea of his own intelligence.
So this is another populist move. There's gonna be a lot of them. Anecdotal generalization. So instead of addressing key systemic issues like class sizes or underfunding, she personalizes this problem into individual villains, in this case, the terrible teachers. This kind of rhetoric fuels anti-union and anti-public education narratives, implying that education fails because of bad individuals and not bad policies. It's worth noting that these terrible teachers she mentions probably worked under the same resource-starved conditions that she's now defending. So while she claims to reject systemic blame, she's actually reinforcing it, just sideways. And I'm not arguing that there's bad teachers out there. I've had horrific teachers. You probably have had horrific teachers too. However, that's not really part of this conversation. Let's contender.
Abilities, and they kind of squashed them a little bit. And I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be a different kind of teacher. I wanted to kind of grab those kids and let them know no, all of us are smart. All of you have purpose. All of you have talents. All of you have abilities. And I wanted to be part of finding those in each kid.
Well, in my opinion, you became a teacher for all the right reasons why teachers should become teachers.
Yeah.
Really, right? You want to be an impact on young individuals who are vulnerable.
Okay, so this moment is confirmation looping. He restates her values in his own words to build this ideological alignment. This is not an interview. This is reinforcement. Every is a cue for the audience to nod along and not to think critically.
To give them the best path to success for their lives.
Yeah.
Are you in agreement with that?
Yeah,
exactly. So we have a teacher strike going on in Alberta, and it's no secret that I've been covering the teacher strike, and I've been asking for teachers to stand up and to be vocal about what is actually going on, because a lot of teachers are afraid to do what you're doing today and come out and actually say, this is what's going on and it's your perspective.
So this is where the narrative pivot happens from personal to political. He frames the strike as something teachers are afraid to talk about, implying a culture of silence or intimidation. This is deliberate distortion. The ATA, or the Alberta Teachers Association, encourages informed dialogue and transparency. What teachers are actually afraid of is retaliation from employers or online harassment, often the same kind that his type of videos attract. So when he says teachers are afraid, what he really means is that teachers know better than to legitimize misinformation.
Be clear with something. You haven't been coached. I haven't sat here and told you what you need to say.
Whenever somebody insists that manipulating the conversation is not happening, that's your red flag that manipulation of the conversation is happening. This preemptive denial is rhetorical insulation. It frames any future critique as unfair because he's already disclaimed bias. But bias, however, is not neutralized just by saying it out loud. This is good. We're only a few minutes in, but I feel like this is sharp. I knew there was a reason I spent hours putting together this script. Okay, continue.
This is for you to tell your story from your opinion and what you see every day in the classroom. So let's start with the teacher strike. Let's start with the offer. The offer was presented to you teachers, and how did you vote?
Okay, so the original offer that we got back in the spring, I actually voted in favor of the strike. I was overwhelmingly in favor. And that was because that was a mediator's recommendation. And the mediator's recommendation said that they were going to solve the complexities issue by creating basically a committee. And if you had a classroom that was had too many kids in it or was overly complex, you would have to petition. First, you'd have to talk to the principal. And if they couldn't come up with a solution, you'd have to petition this committee and say, this is the issue I'm having. The committee was only going to meet twice a year. And obviously hear all of the complaints. I teach 4 classes a day. I'm a secondary teacher. So if I had 4 complex classes like I always do, I would have to make 4 separate petitions and meet 4 separate times to discuss those issues. The chances that we were even going to get a solution before the semester was over was next to impossible. So I thought that if we agreed to that, it would make the problem much worse for kids. And because we would have signed off on it, we would have essentially said that's a good solution and checked that box, and they wouldn't have been continuing to try to solve that problem. And I didn't want to put my name on that and say, yes, I think that's a good solution. So then we got the offer from the government, the one that we are all talking about now. And I thought it was a great offer.
Just a point of order here. The differences between the 2 offers that she's describing right now are the exact same, with the exception of teachers getting a free COVID-19 vaccination. And that's only happening now because our government made COVID vaccines and flu vaccines something that we have to pay for that isn't part of our universal health care. And recently I read that if you want a vaccine for COVID-19 or the regular flu vaccine for next year, you have to order it by, I think it was December 15th. The way that she's talking about the 2 different offers are like they are so different, but in fact, they were almost identical, with the exception of the fact that the government was willing to give something to teachers that they a handful of weeks earlier took away. I really struggle to see where she finds a difference between the 2 offers because the difference is negligible. In fact, it's almost insulting. So I don't know.
we were getting 3,000 new teachers, which was our number from what I understand. I believe that we asked for the 3,000 new teachers, 1,000 a year for the next 3 years. We were getting the 12%, again, 3% for the next 4 years. And I even think it was retroactive. Anyway, so we all know what the thing, and I voted to accept that offer. I was one of...
Okay, so this section is critical. Her summary of the offer is oversimplified to the point of distortion. The supposed 3,000 new teachers was not a guaranteed commitment. It was a political talking point, not an enforceable clause. Similarly, the 12% increase isn't a flat raise. It's staged below inflation and spread across years. The ATA's central argument was not about teacher pay. It was unsustainable classroom complexity. So when she's talking about this first offer being unacceptable because it did not account for classroom complexity, the second offer somehow becomes acceptable even though there were no differences to that part of the offer. Because her reasoning here directly, almost word for word, mirrors government talking points. So this kind of undermines the no coaching claim, in my opinion.
Thousands of teachers who voted to accept the offer. I thought it was fair. And I thought the idea of going on strike and pausing school again, like we did when we were in COVID, was so damaging that it wasn't worth doing that to the kids.
Okay, so this is where emotional manipulation enters. Appealing to the kids reframes a labor negotiation as a moral failing. It leverages the trauma of COVID-19 to guilt teachers for collective action, as if the strike is a selfish act rather than an ethical stand for learning conditions. The irony here is that the teachers are striking for the students, for smaller class sizes, for support staff, for livable workloads. But fear-based rhetoric like this redefines advocacy as abandonment.
Let's touch on that for a second, because you were a teacher in COVID. And what did you see when kids finally came back to school? What's your perspective on that?
I mean, I had kids. All of my kids were still in school. And during COVID, my oldest son graduated during COVID. He had a drive-through graduation. So, meaning we had to sit in our cars and honk when he walked the stage. It was terrible. Kids have so many gaps. They continue to have gaps. My youngest son continues to have gaps. All of the kids that I'm seeing, especially kids who are coming into the younger grades, like the grade 10 kids, they have gaps in the core subjects, and they aren't understanding them. And as teachers, we have a finite amount of time to teach the curriculum that we're responsible to teach. And we can't go back and fill in those gaps.
Okay, so here's where the anecdotal overgeneralization comes in again. Carrie is talking about her personal experience and extending it to all students. The reality is, COVID affected students unevenly depending on their socioeconomic status, school resources, and individual learning needs. By generalizing, she's subtly framing the system as failing, which primes the audience for her later political commentary. Also note, the emotional manipulation, drive-through graduation, gaps. This is all fear-laden language that is designed to signal crisis. This primes viewers to accept her ideological framing as urgent and necessary.
Ideas of how we might have been able to solve that problem, but obviously no one's asking me. But
yeah, you have the Jason Schillings of the world that are kind of what I see running the show, who is the ATA president for those of you that don't know. So there's obviously a gap coming out of COVID, and COVID wasn't...
Okay, we have to pause here again. This man has a personal vendetta for Jason Schilling for some reason, the ATA president. In fact, this morning, as I was perusing Instagram, I saw this post that really is just slandering Jason Schilling for being at a pride parade, having a pride flag, and the comments are absolutely disgusting. It's always so interesting to see the kind of communities that people cultivate with their comments section. Like, looking through at these comments, this does not seem like people I would want to spend time with. Do they to you? Like, no, these are sad. Those comments are sad. Those comments are angry. Those comments are... I'm not able to think of any other word other than pathetic. But anyway, Kate, back to the script. So here she positions herself excluded from the decision making, implying that the ATA and system leadership are unresponsive. This again, populist anti-intellectualism. She represents the ground truth teacher, while institutions like the unions or administrators are cast as detached and politically biased. This is the classic outsider versus elite narrative that is very common in right-leaning education rhetoric.
very long ago, right? And so you have kids that were younger then still experiencing that gap, and now we're into a brand new teacher strike where you voted it down. You wanted your deal. You thought it was fair, and I thought it was fair too. And I can tell you a lot of Alberta parents think it was fair as well.
Okay, so this is an attempt at constructing a consensus somehow. Berta Proud Dad, her, and Alberta parents are all aligned. Notice the rhetorical effect here. Every critique of their position is framed as opposition to parents, not a legitimate policy disagreement. This is emotionally manipulative framing, implying that the strike or union demands are against the interest of children and families rather than supportive of them.
And so from your perspective or your opinion, working within the school board, getting those ATA newsletters, is this a NDP? So is the NDP behind this, in your opinion? Would they be working with the ATA?
Well, I don't know that for a fact, so I don't really want to say factually that that's true. I can say, as a conservative teacher, my experience so far is that everything sort of is approached from the left. And whether that's NDP, whether that's Liberal, it's definitely towards the left. And there's a lot of policies, there's a lot of approaches to learning, there's a lot of approaches to how we do things in the school that I don't agree with. And I obviously voice my opinion. I talk to people about it, but I'm one of the only teachers I know that ever says anything. So of course I'm one among many.
Okay, so now the anti-intellectual framing becomes quite explicit. She casts union governance as partisan rather than procedural. So, okay, 3 key issues here. There's no factual evidence that the ATA is politically controlled by the NDP. Unions do advocate on social policy, but advocacy is not collusion. And labeling education policy as leftist is a subjective ideological filter, not critical analysis. And her saying, "I'm the one of few who sees it," is language that primes the audience to view her dissent as courageous, and that amplifies this outsider narrative.
Well, you're vocal in your school, you're vocal in the lunchroom, and what's the feedback from that?
Typically, honestly, typically teachers don't really want to talk to me about it. Like, they just kind of...
I'm not going to be mean because that's not the point. So we're going to move on.
They say something polite sometimes and they'll avoid the conversation most of the time. I don't get into really robust debates with a lot of teachers. I've gotten into a few, and I get along with most of the teachers that I work with, or all of the teachers that I work with, really. There's nobody that I don't get along with. I think it's important to have a diversity of opinion, especially in schools. We're teaching kids how to think critically, or we should be teaching kids how to think critically. And part of that is that there's a variety of opinions, and we're supposed to explore how we all come to think the way we think.
Absolutely. That's the adult way to do things.
Yeah.
And honestly, being a teacher or being a figurehead, somebody that, your students look up to, that's the example you want to set on them. Is it's okay to have differences of opinion, and it's okay for you to debate that difference of opinion, and it's okay not to hate each other at the end of that.
For sure.
Here's a rhetorical pivot to a seemingly reasonable claim: critical thinking and respectful disagreement. The catch? They equate all opinions as equally valid, including ideologically based or factually incorrect ones. This is false equivalency, treating anti-scientific or just straight up discriminatory opinions as just another viewpoint to have in a classroom. This not so subtly undermines evidence-based practice and elevates personal belief over data and pedagogy. It's just embarrassing, and I keep getting stuck between thinking that they are doing this on purpose, or rather they just don't have the capacity to see the fundamental errors in their way of thinking. I don't know what it is. I don't know which one is worse, but ultimately it doesn't matter what their intent is.
So I guess my next question for you would be, if you're with your teacher colleagues, I would say, and they're not debating with you, you can have a friendly relationship with them. Then why is everybody so scared to speak out? Because I'm getting emails after emails, and we're talking thousands at this point.
Yeah.
Sorry. No. I usually use protective language here. He hasn't had thousands of emails. He hasn't. I'm sorry. False. Incorrect.
Don't say my name. Don't say where I work. Don't say who I am. but this is what's
Like maybe a handful of fringe teachers, but I'm sorry, Berta Proud Dad. Like, bro, you didn't get thousands of emails. Pack it up, get it out of here.
happening. What would you think is going on? Why are teachers so scared to speak out?
I'm typically, anyone who knows me will know that I'm typically a very outspoken person, and just in life, right? So I'm never really afraid to just say my opinion. Because I have very thoughtful, I spend a lot of time thinking about my opinions and developing my opinions and being willing to change my opinions if the evidence changes.
Really, the issue here is what constitutes evidence for this person? Because clearly scientific evidence is not what counts as evidence, because then you wouldn't be on Berta Proud Dad's awful podcast. So I don't know. This doesn't really make sense.
Afraid to say it because I'm willing to admit I'm wrong if I am.
Okay, so this framing here is very double-edged. She positions herself as a rational, evidence-driven, and fearless teacher, while others are portrayed as weak or intimidated. Notice how cancel culture is weaponized. It's invoked to justify her vocal position, portraying critique as silencing. This is a populist-style argument. Claim victimhood while criticizing institutions for holding you accountable.
A lot of people are just sort of non-confrontational. I think the majority of people are non-confrontational, and they don't want the pushback. We did see a lot of cancel culture in the last 5 years, and maybe they're afraid of that. I don't know why other teachers don't want to speak up. I wish they would. I'd love to know who the other conservative teachers are, especially if I work with them. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what? If
Okay, here we see the narrative pivot, right? From personal courage to collective caution. So cancel culture is invoked as a weaponized term. It conflates legitimate professional accountability with social ostracism. Framing herself as fearless while implying other teachers are cowardly constructs a moral hierarchy with zero evidence. And this is a classic populist tactic. Elevate yourself as the rational outsider while dismissing institutions and peers.
you're a conservative teacher out there and you work with her, get a hold of me. We'll set you guys up and you guys can be friends forever.
Like, notice the networking pitch here, right? It's less about education. It's more about ideology. So encouraging teachers to self-identify so you can be besties with Carrie from the Berta Proud Dad podcast. I'm sorry. This is just really sad. It's a really sad life. Okay, let's keep going.
And I do respect you saying that, the NDP and the ATA aren't working together. And from my perspective, they absolutely are, right? And the reason I say that is you have your union dues are being spent on political attack ads against Danielle Smith and the UCP government, and we've seen that. Then you have the NDP spending their money on political attack ads against the UCP government, but they're both saying the same thing. So you were absolutely correct in my opinion that they're probably not working together collectively on a piece of paper and in meetings and doing it. There's definitely a strategy that I see. And I did see, do you get those ATA newspapers? Do you receive those in the mail?
Yeah.
And I did read one. I got one sent to me. And you are absolutely correct. They're left-leaning. Everything in them is left-leaning.
Yeah.
Okay, again, a false equivalency in action. Equating left-leaning commentary with indoctrination is incredibly misleading. Professional union communications often contain advocacy. Presenting this as partisan propaganda misrepresents routine union activity. This is a textbook way to frame institutions as politically dangerous, reinforcing fear-based rhetoric.
And so we can move into Danielle Smith possibly forcing teachers back to work. What are your thoughts about that?
I really hope she does.
You really
I
hope she
really,
does.
really hope she does. I miss my students. I'm really worried about them. I have grade 12s who are trying to get into university. They've made their applications already. They're worried, especially those who want to go out of province.
Okay, 3 critical points here. Number 1, advocating for government intervention against the collective bargaining process is a direct alignment with anti-union, anti-rights rhetoric. 2, she frames this as concern for students, but the argument ignores that forced returns can undermine teacher morale and quality of education, a subtle inversion of cause and effect. Number 3, emotional appeal here, worry for for students is used to justify policy positions, a classic appeal to pity logical fallacy. Oh, just kidding, there's 4. A really quick civics detour here. So the notwithstanding clause, section 33 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, allows provincial governments to override certain charter rights temporarily. So some politicians reference this to justify laws that otherwise might be struck down. This is relevant here because any policy forcing teachers back to work or overriding union decisions could technically invoke this clause. It's a very heavy-handed tool and is extremely controversial. This also sets the precedent for other premiers in our country that human rights are optional. Alberta is center stage here, and our entire country is watching for what is about to happen.
Not going to care what happened in Alberta. So I'm worried about them. I'm worried about more gaps, you know, and I'm worried about the kids that we're all supposed to be worried about. What about the kids who come from lower income families and the parents can't stay home when the kids are not in school, you know, and their situation is getting worse? What about those kids who need the mental health supports in the schools? And they're not getting them every day? What about the kids who they need school lunch programs? You know, those kids, I'm worried about them. Yeah. I'm truly worried about them.
You're a teacher, and absolutely you should be worried about them, right? And that's why I actually, so there's a big thing out there saying that I hate teachers, and I absolutely don't hate teachers. I understand that teachers have a very important position in children's lives. You know, as parents, we send our kids to the schools and we have to trust the education system that they're going to bring up our kids to a certain degree and not impose on our value and belief system in our home. And what I've seen is that happens a lot in the public school system, from the wokeness narrative that is in public school. So I'll tell you a little bit about me. So I graduated university with a Bachelor of Business Administration, where I majored in marketing, minored in communications. My whole 4-year term while I was there, the student union was always doing something, activism. There was always some sort of activism that was happening. And they were truly trying to turn university students into little activists. And what I've seen is not all teachers, because I'm sitting with one right now where it didn't turn her into a little activist, ladies and gentlemen. So remember that.
Ladies and gentlemen, and no one else. Okay. This is fear-mongering in full swing, right? This conflates civic engagement, critical thinking, and social education with indoctrination. He's presenting his ideological lens here as morally superior, which is anti-intellectual reasoning. Subjective judgment does not replace evidence. And also, anybody who legitimately and seriously, without a little wink of funny, uses the term woke, especially in a professional setting, you've lost it, bestie. You've lost it. Would you rather be sleeping? Ugh. So silly.
Is they tried turning me into an activist, right? And what I'm seeing is
he not an activist right now? Is this man not serving as an activist for conservative, right-wing, extremist, fascist values? Make it make sense.
Who's coming out with that woke narrative of the left in the university system, trying to now turn their students into little activists through whatever type of ideology. And would you agree that your teacher should never tell you who they're voting for?
I would agree with you completely. However, I was at teacher conference and I took for teacher conference, you get to pick classes that you want to do. And I was seeking out more interesting ones. Like there's ones that are sort of, I don't know, like jewelry making and those types of things. I don't want to do that type of stuff. So I found one that was about democracy and sort of discussing democracy and how do we approach that. My minor, when I went to university, was social studies. So that's another subject that I could be teaching. And so this was meant for social studies teachers to come and talk about democracy. And I, in that conversation with the other teachers, said, I don't think we should be talking to kids about what our political leanings are. I think we should ask them, like if they ask us, we should ask them questions about like, well, what do you think about that? And sort of have them start thinking critically, like why do you think that? You know, so for instance, if I'm a conservative, instead of saying I'm a conservative, they say, if they ask me, you know, what do you think about Danielle Smith? I'll say, okay, well, what do you think about her? Like, do you know anything about her positions? And what do you think about the NDP? And what do you know about their positions? And have them think about it critically. And how would that position, you know, really impact your life and that sort of thing, and have those conversations. Most of the teachers disagreed with me and said that they full on tell their students their political view, and their justification for that was that if you're not going to put your skin in the game, why should they? Like, why?
Okay, again, false equivalency and misapplied critical thinking. So her approach here, asking students what they think, is defensible, but her framing implies that teachers expressing personal political views is universally harmful, which it is not. I've been a teacher for many years, and I am very open about my political viewpoints, and it can be summed up into the following sentence: I want to minimize human suffering and maximize human flourishing. End of sentence. I'm not saying I'm right-leaning, I'm not saying I'm left-leaning, I'm not saying I'm centrist, but you can look at the spectrum of policy and politics and pretty clearly tell what side is focusing on minimizing human suffering and maximizing human flourishing. That's not political. That's a fundamental moral value that I don't think should be controversial, but yet here we are. So again, another subtle fear-based anti-intellectualist point. This frames diverse political discourse as a moral risk rather than an opportunity for critical engagement.
They tell you what their political views are if you're not going to also do it. And I mean, I suppose I can see that as a point, but if a student really likes me, I don't want them to be a conservative just because I am.
Yep, that's right.
And if a student doesn't like me, I don't want them to not be one just because I am.
Yeah.
I don't want to influence them in some way. I want them to make their own decisions.
Mm-hmm.
I've since definitely had conversations with kids about things going on in the world, but at the same time, completely letting them know that there is never a time when you need to see things my way, ever. Like, I'm gonna love you and teach you and be, and respect you and all of those things, no matter what your political views are. I don't care what they are. That's not what we're here for.
Responsible teaching.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a rare moment of clarity. So Carrie articulates proper pedagogical boundaries. Responsible teaching is indeed about fostering critical thinking without ideological pressure. Wow, the first time I agree. Amazing. Ironically, she frames herself as the responsible teacher, while later in this segment, she critiques her colleagues for an alleged bias. This sets up another false equivalence, implying that her ideology is the neutral baseline, which, of course, it is not.
All that is responsible teaching.
Yeah.
So now that you said all that, and thank you for being that style of teacher, because that's what we need. I'm going to send my daughter to your class now. Do you think all teachers are following that?
No, I know that they're not all following that.
You know that. Could
Yeah.
you give me a specific example? And no names. We don't want to tell anybody who this person would be, but.
I mean, I had a student who transferred. She talked to me about being someone who had found God while she was in grade 10, and along with her family, they had gone through a bit of a trauma, and she had become quite religious in grade 10, and she was in a class that was a social studies class, and it was very obvious that the questions were being asked about when the Japanese were being sort of persecuted in Canada. And
when the Japanese were sort of being persecuted, you mean Japanese internment camps? What in the fresh hell is going on here in this video? Also, I do want to make a point here and say that when I'm talking to adults, especially outspoken anti-intellectual adults, specifically who have a heavy belief in religion, I can dismiss it and laugh and say, God's not real. I don't believe in your flying spaghetti monster in the sky, of which there is no evidence for. But specifically for a student like this, it would be quite clear that anybody who found God as a young person, specifically if their parents didn't indoctrinate them, we gotta flip the narrative back on them. They are clearly looking for connection, and they are looking for something safe. They're looking for comfort. And if they found that in a God, it wouldn't be my place as a teacher to say God's not real and that's dumb to a child. I would never say that. I would ask them questions and see what their belief is. And, it's honestly none of my business unless it's affecting other things in the classroom that are my business. But a God belief in itself is fine, but the God belief attached to this Christian nationalism nonsense is what I would critique. Okay, let's keep going.
are being asked that you needed to sort of be on the side saying things went this kind of way. And the answers had to follow a certain line if you wanted to get it correct. Mm-hmm. And she showed me the questionnaire, and she said, I didn't necessarily agree with every single thing that the teacher wanted me to say. So I wrote down what I really thought, and I got it wrong. And when I asked him about it, he wouldn't have a discussion with me. He just told me I got it wrong.
Okay, here she's presenting a single anecdote as systemic evidence, which is a very quite hasty generalization. The issue described, which is a rigid grading rubric, is an educational design problem, not evidence of leftist indoctrination. And her framing indoctrination as taking over inflates a normal classroom conflict into a political crisis.
And when I read it over, a lot of the answers were subjective and not necessarily black and white. I think they should have been open to having a conversation and maybe seeing,
And without the context of what that questionnaire was about, this is a very loosely crocheted blanket of an argument. Like, you could stick your whole fist through, there's so many holes.
I'm hearing the exact same thing, where teachers will actually write out these questionnaires and they're actually guiding the student into a corner almost of having to think a certain way. And that's unfair completely. And that's only one part of how indoctrination is taking over the school system. And, you know, I'm just going to show a picture here, an image on the screen right now. This is Jason Schilling, the head of the ATA, who's wrapped in a rainbow flag, for instance. Like, that is literally who represents you at a union level. And kids look up to him. He's a former teacher. He's a terrible teacher from the people that have told me. And now he's the head of the union.
Okay, this is ad hominem and fear-mongering. Attacking identity and union leadership credentials instead of analyzing policy or educational outcomes? Bestie, what are we doing? This is clearly to tap into culture war tactics, associate queer visibility with incompetence and moral danger. And the image placement definitely reinforces the bias visually, and this is a common manipulative tactic in online political media.
Jason Schilling is out here. You know, yesterday, I don't know if you know that the ATA was given by the Smith government, basically an opportunity to go back to work. And the kids will be going to school on Monday. And it didn't even come to you guys. No. You guys didn't get a say on it. You didn't get a vote on it. Jason Schilling and his negotiation team just cut it out and said,
because it was the exact same deal that teachers had rejected not once, but twice. I can see where he's coming from, but not that much.
We're just going to continue to be on strike. How does that make you feel as a union member?
I mean, I was really frustrated about that. I would have liked to have a decision on that. What I found really frustrating about that was when Danielle Smith was asked about it, like, why did you take out the complexity, the caps, the class caps? And her answer was very fair. She said, because if you look at the number of active teachers that are full-time active teachers in Alberta, we have X number. And I think it's like 51,000 and some. But then she took away teachers that might be on like leaves or something like that. So it ended up being like 35,000 some odd teachers that are fully active, full-time teachers.
Now keep in mind, full-time teachers include principals, vice principals, and specialists. Our music teachers, band teachers, shop teachers, dance, drama, all kinds of other positions where teachers don't necessarily have a homeroom with students assigned to them. When you consider how many schools are in Alberta and subtract from that, and doing one math equation in order to conclude something about an entire province of students and teachers, it's just simply irresponsible and dumb. I'm sorry, it just doesn't make sense. It's just irresponsible. Anyway, let's keep going.
If you look at that compared to how many students we have, then we should have a 21-to-1 ratio, but we don't. I have 40 students in each one of my classes 4 times a day.
We misrepresent the logical complexity of staffing and class sizes to support a political narrative. The tension between full-time teachers versus total teachers is presented as incomplete or malfeasance. So the emphasis here on where are the teachers echoes this classic anti-union rhetoric, and this paints collective bargaining as obstruction to children's welfare. Where are the teachers? What does that mean? The teachers are in classrooms. Well, like, where are the teachers? Like, a full-time teacher getting paid a full-time salary is what? Just hiding up in a closet somewhere and nobody knows who they are and nobody's looking for them and nobody's holding them accountable for what? Just ignoring their class of students, and then those students get shoved into other teachers' classrooms, and that's why all the numbers are so high, because we're paying all these teachers to do nothing? Is that I literally do not understand what we are saying here. It doesn't make sense.
So we don't have that. But so where are the teachers? So if we're supposed to have that, so what she was saying is if we put an arbitrary number into this agreement, it doesn't necessarily translate into how it's going to work in the classrooms. Like we need to figure out how practically to make this work.
In the words of our Premier Danielle Smith, there is more than one way to peel a potato.
And would you be in favor of an investigation onto the school boards and to see exactly where these teachers are? Because I think if you do Danielle Smith's math,
Like, this isn't a game of hide and seek. Where do you think they are? They're not hide.
it brings you down to 21 kids per school. But we do know, like you said, teachers on leave, teachers sick, teachers
Okay, well, that's the same thing twice. And that
are administrators doing other work. But we need to know who they are, where they are, how they're getting paid, because it's our kids. The school system exists for the children. The school system doesn't exist for the ATA. Right?
We need to know who they are and how they're getting paid. Okay, go onto a school website and see exactly who works in a school. But don't do it for Carrie, a high school foods teacher in the Calgary Board of Education, who's publicly doing this interview. Anyway, go onto the school websites and see what teachers are there, and then go to their collective agreement and see what they are getting paid. Problem solved.
Union
We serve the student.
Exactly. And those are the clientele, and the parents have to entrust the teacher with their child.
Yes, okay, accountability is legitimate, but he conflates standard oversight with a political attack on teachers' rights. This frames unions as obstacles rather than professional advocates working within legal and educational frameworks. Again, subtle fear appeal here. This suggests that union activity could harm children if it goes unchecked. A recurring rhetorical device in anti-intellectual media. It's all anti-intellectual. It is all anti-intellectual. I'm going to put up the thumbnail right here for my anti-intellectualism podcast episode over there on DTalk. Go check it out if you're interested. That's a really good episode. Okay, moving on.
We absolutely need to know. So you would be in favor of an investigation?
I think anything that's publicly funded needs to be accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you mean like private schools too? Okay, good. Glad we agree.
I mean, if I'm paying for it, you're paying for it. We need to know where our money's going.
Mm-hmm.
We need to know where the teachers are. Are the teachers being placed in the right jobs?
What does that even mean? You're just talking now, Carrie.
We have a lot of teachers who are working specialist jobs, and that's why they're not in the classroom. Like, what are they doing that they're not face-to-face with kids every day?
Specialists are face-to-face every day. I've been a music specialist. I was face-to-face with 500 kids every week. It was insane. Because
that's what we would like them to do. And if we're top-heavy, like I hear that we are, and I don't know that we are, but if we're top heavy and there's too many people up in offices and not enough people in the classrooms, we need to fix that.
Yeah.
Somehow or another.
But those people in central office would not be part of that active teacher list. They just wouldn't be. Right? If I'm wrong, you have to tell me in the comments, but I really don't think that those people would be included in there. And I really don't think most people in central office have an education degree either. Some of them would naturally, but I think the strong majority wouldn't.
We need to get more kids with more teachers so that we have smaller class sizes. I agree that we need smaller class sizes. My disagreement, I don't disagree that we have complex classrooms. We do. I have complex classrooms. I have overcrowded classrooms. And so does every other teacher I work with. I don't think it's a government problem, though, to fix. I think it's an internal problem. I think we have our own ways that we're organizing things that isn't working.
So you would agree that the government is giving you the resources that they have to be in a government, and that it comes down to a school board issue?
I think for the most part. Now, I don't know if more funding is necessary, but I don't think we'll know that until we know how the funding is being allocated.
Until we have an investigation.
Yeah, so maybe we need more funding. That's possible. But I think
if you really think that our conservative government thought that there was a mismanagement of funds amongst school boards in Alberta, you don't think they would have looked into that already? You don't think that would have been the biggest smear campaign of the century if that was actually happening? I mean, maybe it is, and maybe the UCP doesn't care, but I find that really hard to believe that that could be happening and that wouldn't be looked into by a government who is so keen on dismantling public education. It doesn't have a ring of truth to it, you know?
Danielle Smith's point is that she doesn't want to throw good money after bad. So if we're not spending the money, it's like a kid, right? If you give a kid money and he goes and wastes it on video games, but he was supposed to buy clothes, you're not going to give him more money to go waste on more video games, right? So you need to make sure that it's being spent in a way that is effective. And if it's not being spent, they should be open to suggestions. Like, you could do it differently because we could organize it this way. And I don't know why there's so much push and pull to not do that.
Yeah, there should be a roundtable discussion.
Yeah.
This is what boggles my mind when it comes down to the ATA, school boards, Danielle Smith and her negotiating team, as well as Jason Schilling, is why can't we sit there, have a discussion about where are the resources going and how are they being used effectively? Because I truly do believe there's an asset mismanagement. I got called out the other day for calling teachers assets. Well, that's exactly what they are when it comes down to you're an asset to the school system, and you're a very valued asset.
The way he's speaking, he positions himself as if he is an educational authority. But again, if you remember in the beginning of this video, he talked about having a business degree or business management degree in communications or something like that, which has nothing to do with education. And whenever you're listening to somebody talk, especially in an online space, the person who sounds conclusive and without a shadow of a doubt, they say that they're right, that's a red flag and you should run from that person. Hey, I'm smart, okay? I have 5, 6, 7, I have 8 years of university education, and I almost have a master's in education with a specialization in neuroscience. I am an incredibly smart person. I'm also kind of dumb sometimes and don't know things, you know? I will get things wrong. I leave room for nuance. I expect to misunderstand and misinterpret and misreport things from time to time. I speak with protective language because I know that I can't possibly be correct about everything. So when somebody like this is spouting off things that are so clearly and verifiably false, when somebody is confidently spouting everything, like, yeah, there's some things that I'm pretty confident about because I'm a data-driven doll and I've read the science, right? There are things that I will get wrong. And this man does not give that vibe of being wrong as a possibility. And that's a huge red flag. I guess not just in online contexts, but in real life too. People are wrong. Humans are tremendously flawed. Unfortunately, or fortunately. I don't know. Let's keep going.
We are mismanaging assets. Then we need to know where are we allocating our resources and why aren't we doing it effectively?
Yeah.
And the NDP way or Liberal way, they're both left-leaning parties, is to throw more money at something.
Yeah.
And we've seen that out in the Heednetchy. It's all money, money, money. Jason Schilling, money, money, money. We need more money. We need more resources. Danielle Smith and her team are being fiscally responsible. Let's figure out where it's all going. And I actually truly believe an investigation is coming, and I welcome that. For Albertan taxpayers, we deserve that, right?
Just like Albertan taxpayers deserve to see the unedited and original and honestly legitimate healthcare scandal. Where's that expired Tylenol, Danielle? Tell us about it. When she was arguing with that reporter during the press release, I'll put in a clip right here.
So I would say that it's very clear from the report that that AHS decision makers did not follow their own
Right, but
policies.
Premier, do you carry any do you feel any responsibility for what has happened?
I think I'd encourage you.
Do you carry any responsibility at all?
I'd encourage you to read the report.
I've read the report. I'm just wondering.
If I may, you'll see that through much of this decision making, there was a former premier. There was a leadership contest, and there was a by-election campaign going on. So I would say that that is a pretty clear evidence that a lot of the problems with AHS decision-making were with AHS decision-makers and their staff. And I think that the judge's report makes that very, very clear when he indicates that no politician, their staff, or anyone working for the government of Alberta was responsible for any wrongdoing.
Crazy. She's pretty lifeless, hey? Like the little dead behind the eyes. Anyway, happens to the best of us. Let's keep going.
I'll end with this. You know, we'll go back to the wokeism or whatever it might be in a classroom. You've already said it's not your duty, responsibility as a teacher to do that. How often do you see it? Do you see this daily, every time you go to work?
So I teach culinary arts, so I'm sort of isolated in a kitchen all day. Yeah. Which I like. I'm not complaining about that, but I don't necessarily see what's happening in the rest of school. I think where I see the most wokeness is when we're doing professional development days. Mm-hmm. And we're being told how we need to see everything. We're being told what our viewpoint is. Mm-hmm. And I don't want somebody telling me what my viewpoint is. I'm perfectly capable of thinking about that myself. I like to think critically. So you can present a viewpoint to me, and you can present the alternative to me, but you can't tell me what my viewpoint has to be in order to be in compliance with policies. that's where I fall off. So if I can give an example of that, we had a PD day last year. It was all day. So half the day was spent on Indigenous ways of knowing and half the day was spent on transgender issues. And we had a guest speaker, I think she was like a specialty teacher, who came to talk about transgender issues and basically presented it as anyone who believes that a transgender individual going into the bathroom or the change room that they identify with, anyone who has a problem with that is prejudice. And they're the ones that should be removed from the change room or the bathroom. And she went on and on and on. When she was finished speaking, I put my hand up and I said, I think, she said there was no valid reason for somebody to have a problem with it. So I said, no, I think there are valid reasons. I don't think it just makes you prejudiced. I can understand why somebody would feel unsafe or would feel nervous about this. And I don't think it's as black and white as you see it. And I was told that I would need to leave my values at the door and I need to
accept somebody else's.
She said, I need to leave my values at the door and I need to adopt the values of the board that I work for.
Wow.
And my view is that I am there to represent the parents and the families of the kids who I'm teaching. And I don't think that the majority of parents want me putting those views on those kids or accepting those strategies in the school. And so I felt like I needed to speak up.
Wow. I'm like, my brain just went crazy right now because...
yeah, his brain just went crazy. So what she's talking about here, this is very clearly projection. A belief that inclusion or anti-discrimination training is an attack rather than education. It reframes equity as aggression, a rhetorical inversion that makes the oppressor feel oppressed. Yes, there are reasons why somebody might feel fearful about a transgender person using the washroom or change room that best aligns with their gender identity. However, there are not valid reasons, and it is in fact prejudiced. This is such a mess. It just consistently blows my mind that this is a currently working public teacher. It's one thing if you are transphobic. It's one thing to have these views, but it is entirely another thing to be a working teacher for a public board of education, one of the largest in Western Canada, proudly spouting transphobia. That's wild to me. That is completely wild to me, and it gets worse.
You mentioned, okay, I don't necessarily see it every day, but then I'm like, okay, and I'm like, all right, that's a totally fair answer. Then you talk about these personal development days where our kids are not going to school, but you're going to school.
Yeah.
And this is what I honestly think a personal development thing is you go to school to become a better teacher. So you use those Fridays to go and become, you're sitting there learning at this time that you have to accept transgenderism. You have to be comfortable with it or else you're wrong.
Yeah.
And then you're basically being bullied. You probably didn't feel bullied because you're conservative and we don't feel bullied. We're not victims, right? But many other left-leaning teachers in that classroom or wherever you guys were listening to that would feel bullied into thinking that way. They would take that now into the school system, right? Because, okay, this is what my board wants. I have to listen to my board and fear-mongered into it. That is wild to me because I honestly think as a parent that you guys are there. I don't even know what you guys are doing, but just becoming professional development. There's nothing professional development about telling you that you're wrong for your views on somebody's mental illness. And that's what I call it. It's not what she said. It's a mental illness, ladies and gentlemen. And yeah.
He just said that being transgender is a mental illness. This is an explicit pathologizing of trans identities, language that has historically been used to justify discrimination. And this in itself demonstrates why professional development on issues like this have to happen because of discrimination like this. This entire commentary in itself demonstrates why professional development has to include anti-discrimination training to combat misinformation exactly like this. And the claim that it's just my opinion does not protect harmful falsehoods. Calling an identity a mental illness directly contradicts decades of psychological and medical consensus.
Crazy.
Yeah. So I find, that's where I'm exposed to it the most is on professional development days, teachers convention. And to be fair, on teachers convention, I seek out those types of conversations. I want to hear what people are telling teachers. I want to hear what we're being told to think. So I go specifically to those classes so that I
But
could.
did you just, sorry, I hate cutting people up. You said, I want to hear what we're being told to think.
Yeah. Well, because,
wow.
So like you said, when you went to
his wows kill me. Like, okay, I can see what he's saying here. Like we can see the logic, but we can also see that it's very flawed, right? You could look at this in the same terms of somebody teaching math, right? 2 + 2 is 4. You are being told to think that 2 + 2 is 4. Is that indoctrination? No. You are being told to think that water is comprised of 2 hydrogen molecules and 1 oxygen molecule. Is that indoctrination? Or is that just scientific fact? You know what I mean? Trans people aren't your issue. Trans people are valid. Scientific fact. Sorry. Not sorry, however. Anyway.
University, you felt like you were being
pushed in a direction.
So I went to school in my 40s. And so I had already been to university in my 20s. It was a completely different experience when I was in my 40s. I have a poster that I ripped off the wall because I walked by it and I took a double take. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was a poster, student-led, that said, socialism is the way. Come to this rally, whatever. Yeah. So I took that because I thought that'll be fun to keep forever. Yeah. But I also found that in each one of my classes, I was being pushed in a certain direction. And I would call out my teachers on that. And what I found so interesting about that is the kids who were in my class, the ones who were in their 20s, they agreed with me. A lot of times they would be like, I fully agree with you, but I never would have thought that. Mm-hmm. Like it wouldn't have occurred to them to even question the teacher. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't have occurred to them to think differently.
You should be questioning teachers. I can get on board with that. But here she equates exposure to ideas with being told what to think. The anecdote about the poster functions as a moral panic prop, using a single poster as proof of systemic ideological takeover. And the narrative that students don't think critically anymore is a core tenet of anti-intellectualism. It's not about protecting inquiry. It's about distrusting education itself. And if we look at the data, the more educated a person is, the more left-leaning they are likely to become. It's almost like the more that you know about the world, the more you care about everything in it.
I'm told to think this way. And when I offered an alternative perspective, they're like, oh, actually, I agree with you. Yeah. You know, and so, but not everybody has people who are willing to sort of push back in their classes. And I wonder what people are learning when they go to university. It makes me nervous.
It absolutely. And that goes back to me talking about little activists. Mm-hmm. Is we are now, we've had a culture shift, I would say, in the last 10 years, especially 20 years, probably, where even if your kid wasn't heavily indoctrinated into a socialism or liberal mindset in elementary or junior high, there's no saving them in university at this point, because universities are heavily funded by left-wing policies, and that is in our left-wing organizations. And that's not only in Canada, that's in the United States, it's in Europe, pretty much every Commonwealth country. So if you think you're going to get your...
Okay, so this is textbook conspiracy theory framing, an imagined global agenda corrupting youth. This sweeping generalization, there's no saving them, eliminates nuance and creates moral panic about education. This is also a right-wing dog whistle. It presents progressive thought as contamination.
And send them to Australia to go to university. You're not changing that. It's not going to change, right? And then what happens is
you would send your children across the world to a different university to protect them from the idea that everybody deserves human rights. What?
Teachers come out with these ideologies, these values, and this belief system, and then they go into PD days, professional development days, and they're like, transgenderism, I have to push it on the kids because the board is telling me to, and I'm completely okay with it.
This is the narrative of control, depicting teachers as mindless agents of a shadowy board. Transgenderism also is a dehumanizing term used to frame gender identity as an ideology or contagious. The claim that teachers push identities ignores that inclusion policies protect students' safety and legal rights, not just beliefs.
Continuously.
It's brainwashing is what it is because you as a teacher are in a place of trust. When a child comes to you in your class or a teenager, they're coming to you with confidence, and they're looking at you as somebody they look up to and they trust. And when you are being told to push a narrative they are going to believe whatever you say.
Yeah.
And that is, they are indoctrinating our kids.
Okay, this is a moral inversion, so turning education into corruption and inclusion into indoctrination. It relies on this fear-based language, indoctrinating our kids, to erode trust in public schools. How is this person not able to see the hypocrisy and the flip side of this conversation? That they have an agenda. They are indoctrinating people, arguably their own children and her students, into this bigoted way of seeing the world. There's an agenda. The agenda is hatred. Blows my mind.
Yeah.
Right there. And I didn't think this interview was even going to go that direction, to be honest with you. I did not think, because and Berta Proud Mom's behind the camera. Did you think that
yeah, right. There isn't just Berta Proud Dad. There's also Berta Proud Mom. I don't know anything about her, and I don't care to.
Development days was about indoctrinating teachers to push a belief?
Absolutely. Well, to be fair, some of them are and some of them are not.
Mm-hmm.
There's ones that are, each school has a PD committee, or at least in high school we do. And the PD committee.
It wouldn't surprise you if I told you that when I was working in a school, I was on the professional development committee. I really fall right into that trope, don't I?
Up with some of the subjects for the PD day, whatever we're going to be learning that day. And then some of them are board specific, and they're across the board. All of the schools will be doing that, whatever they decide that we're going to do that day. So, yeah.
If you're a teacher out there and you have board specific PD days, I would like you to send them to my email, whistleblower@bertaprouddad.com. I want to see this.
Okay, so this call to action invites surveillance and intimidation, encouraging teachers to violate confidentiality agreements and professional ethics. It fosters mistrust and paranoia towards educational governance. He's about to shield her legally right now. She's not speaking for others. She just has a value and a belief system. That is tactical disavowal, allowing bigotry while pretending neutrality.
I'm not going to allow her to give them to me. I'm going to get one of you to give them to me. She's already been brave enough to come on to the show and discuss. And I want to be clear, this is
so brave
opinion, ladies and gentlemen. She's not speaking for other teachers. She has a value and belief system, just like I have a value and belief system. And
your value and belief system is not valid if it's based off of hatred and discrimination of others. You're a bigot. I'm sorry. You're cisgender white folks. It sounds so dismissive to say that, but in what way have these people faced discrimination? Other than for being a bigot. We will discriminate against the bigots, okay? I'll do it again.
Like you at home have a value and belief system. And the moment we stop talking about this, our children are not going to benefit anymore from society, because we have a school strike right now and people telling us that we're wrong. But these are the same people that are pushing the ideology, value, and belief system. Now, I'll end with this. Do you push your values, your beliefs, your ideology, who you're sleeping with, on any of your children?
No. No. I mean, we have discussions.
Have you ever talked about your husband? If she's married. I don't know if she's married, and I'm assuming she's straight. If you've ever talked about your partner, your husband, your wife, you talk about your partner, you are alluding to a sexual preference. But if you frame it in this way of sitting down and talking about your sexual preference, yeah, that would be weird and inappropriate and unprofessional. But talking about your husband or your wife or your partner and using he, her pronouns for that person would indicate a sexual preference. It's a very prominent double standard in education. I'm skipping so much. I was really angry writing this script yesterday.
To have kids tell me what their opinions are of things. I mean, most of the time we're making food, we're having fun, we're listening to music. That's sort of the purpose of my class. My class is a break in the day. Yeah, kids like to come and talk to me about what's going on in their lives, and I really take a lot of pride in the fact that they trust me. Mm-hmm. And I take it very seriously that people send their kids to me and that they trust me to help guide them and teach them. And I really want to do a good job at that. And yeah, I take it very seriously.
Doing God's work. That's what you're doing. You're actually doing what a teacher is supposed to do. And
this is a moral evaluation, right? It positions ordinary ethical teaching as heroic. This light sarcasm, yeah, sure, doing God's work. Doing God's work is bigotry, I'll give you that. It makes sense.
I just want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you for the hundreds of thousands of followers that I have. Thank you, because
188,000. So hundreds of thousands. We'll let it slide.
Took a lot for you to come out and talk about this. We could probably dive into another 3 hours of this.
Oh, would that be a
treat?
treat?
But let's see how this teacher strike pays out. And I just want you to be able to go back to work, back to school, back to your kids, and just do your job and not be affected by the politics that always surrounds everything in this province.
Yeah, it would be nice just to go to work and see my kids again.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Of course, you're welcome.
Well, folks, make sure you share this out and make sure you go.
Make sure you share this out. Okay, so even though he deleted it, I'm still doing what he asked for. Good to know.
Oh, Berta Proud Mom on all socials, as well as check me on YouTube where the full version will be added. Hold up.
Yeah, he hawks his tacky shirts here. Okay. All right, folks, that's a wrap. And wow, what a circus. This was not a conversation about kids or classrooms. It was two adults gaslighting reality, projecting their own biases, and dressing it up as concern for students. Let me be clear. Anecdotes do not equate evidence. Loaded language does not equal truth, and emotional manipulation is still manipulation, no matter how polite and white the delivery. We saw projection, false equivalencies, moral grandstanding, and straight up manipulation, all performed with the confidence of somebody who thinks repeating a claim enough times actually makes it true. And yes, when they try and pathologize trans identities, dismissing critical thinking, or act like PD days are indoctrination, what we're really seeing is fear dressed up as authority. At the end of the day, schools are for students, not ideology, not fear, and certainly not the ego of these two clowns. Okay, no, that was mean, but I'm keeping it. Our job as parents, citizens, and educators is to call it out, demand accountability, and to teach real critical thinking, so the next generation isn't left believing everything they hear from the loudest voices in the room. And Berta Proud Dad, I don't know what his actual name is, but it doesn't matter. He's gonna be pretty forgettable. But if you did get to the end, Berta Proud Dad, I'm glad you're here, and I hope that you share my content with your hateful followers, because clearly I need the engagement, because I'm not buying followers. But thanks for getting to the end of this episode of Dismantling Hate, where we don't sugarcoat, we don't play nice, and we sure as hell don't let bigotry masquerade as concern. So stay calm, stay sharp, stay skeptical, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye. If you liked this, I'm about to film a podcast episode for my other channel, D-Talk with David Day, and this episode is going to be all about fear and how fear is used as a manipulation tactic. So we're going to start by talking about ancient Egypt, when fear as manipulation first started with the pharaohs and all of that, and then we're going to talk about the psychological and emotional components of fear and how it hijacks our brain, and it's going to be a really interesting episode. I don't know if it's going to be out while you're watching this video right now, but it will be coming soon, so subscribe to that channel if you're interested. Okay. Perfect timing. Now I'm really leaving. Okay, bye.